Well, hello everybody, Jason F. New 80s Revolution Cave. It is Sunday, my favorite day of the week, folks, Sunday. I've explained this, we're gonna go low, aren't we? I've explained this many times, why Sunday is so important. I work on Saturdays, just till 2. So, when everybody has if you don't work weekends, you have a Friday night and you get that feel. And then you have a Saturday night and you get that same feel. I don't get that feel until Saturday night. And usually Saturday nights are pretty fun for me or for the kids. Last night we tried to get through Rogue One. We're on a Star Wars mission again. So we've watched, all the Star Wars up in order. And then we messed up. You're supposed to watch the three, 1, 2, and 3. And then you're supposed to watch Solo and Rogue One, and then go to New Hope and beyond. We went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then Solo, then Rogue One. That's out of order. And Rogue One is miserable to sit through. So we're like, all right. It's a prequel to New Hope. We've already seen the New Hope and Empire and Jedi. So we're just going to stop Rogue One. Maybe I'll watch it by myself. And then we're going to jump into the last few movies. I don't know why that's important to tell you, because it's part of my life. And you want to know about my life. Oh, what else? Sundays are great because, there's no pressure to get up in the morning. We all sleep. And then, the kids will get up and they'll get on their PlayStations and they'll play with their friends. And then I will come down here. I will play some Mario 2. And I will get further than I ever have this morning. I almost got to World 4. I got to 3-3. And that's a tough one because you gotta carry that key around and that little sun guy keeps coming after you and just mashes you. It's terrible. Then we bowl. Then Liam and I bowl. Had a good bowling week this morning. We are still in first place by about 3 weeks. It's 8 points a week. And we're in first by about 23 or 24 points. So that's 3 weeks in first place. That's pretty good. We stomp all those dads and their 6-year-old daughters. Bow down. Power Hour. It's the Power Hour, folks, where you are part of the show. You ask the questions, hard-hitting, softballs, whatever you want. Bring them in. We're still finishing up with my man Bale. He's got a few more softballs. And then we're going to go to Lisa's question about grief. My girl Lisa E. Asked about how I handle grief. So losses in my life. So we'll probably hit that one. I don't know. You want the heavy one first or the softballs first? Go ahead. Vote now on your screen. You should have a pop-up coming up on your screen that you can press to vote for softballs or hard hitting. Go ahead, I'll wait. Softballs. Nope, hard hitting. Okay, hard hitting wins. Thank you for voting. How many of you were pushing your screen and waiting for something? Anyway, Lisa says, I'm paraphrasing, but basically she's asking, how do I manage grief in my life? And I'm connecting grief with loss. So how do I manage grief and loss, or grief associated with loss? I don't, I'm either, at 47 years old, I'll be 48 in May. Don't forget to send your birthday presents my way, of course. At almost 50, at a few years away from 50, I guess I'm fortunate enough to have not lost too many people to death in my life. My grandparents, my maternal grandparents on my mom's side, have died, and one of my sisters has died. My grandmother died in 2009. My grandfather died in 2011, and my sister died in 2015. Which really seems like a long way away. That's forever ago. Yeah. My father's mother, my grandmother on my dad's side died in 2010, I wasn't super close with her. I just wasn't. I was more close with my maternal grandmother. I had an aunt that just passed away, but I'm not close with extended family. I'm not close with aunts and uncles and cousins. I haven't lost any friends. No major affiliates, right? So just my grandparents. So that was. We'll talk about both. We'll talk about all three: grandmother, grandfather, and sister, and how I managed it. My grandmother. Again, I lived with her. For any of the new people to the channel, I lived with my grandparents from about 14, 15 or so, until I left when I was 21. I left for 6 months and failed miserably in an apartment. And I think I'm going to add that to the Power Hour at some point. People have asked about the 90s. I don't want to do like a 90s pop culture, but I want to tell you about life in the 90s. So I'll probably do a series of, do you remember your first jobs and your first apartment? And that'll jump us into the 90s. I'm actually looking forward to talking about that. It was one of my favorite eras of life, aside from childhood, obviously, folks. But age 20, 21, one of my favorite times of being alive. And I'll talk about that too on a future episode, because I've got a lot of. I'll talk about first job, but I want to talk about fun jobs that I've had as a kid, and I definitely want to talk about my apartment. So my grandmother, the rumor has it that she fought cancer 2 previous times in her life. I think at one point my grandmother had cervical cancer or ovarian cancer or something like that, which resulted in, a hysterectomy, I think. I remember at one point she had a neck or a throat cancer. It wasn't a throat cancer that rendered her, so I think it was a neck cancer. That was when I was in high school, and she beat that. But then in about 2007 or so, she was diagnosed with a lung cancer. Now, both of my grandparents were ridiculously heavy smokers, horribly heavy chain smokers. And you would think that beating cancer twice, you might lay off the cigarettes, but people don't do that. There are some of you out there who don't do that. But they continued to smoke. And the secondhand smoke in that house was unbelievable. Unbelievable. I'm thankful that I had no residual effects of living with them, because it was thick. It was thick. So my grandma got lung cancer in 2007, and I think we all kind of rolled with it, because she had beaten cancer twice, and so we all just kind of figured she'd beat it again, and she lived almost 2 years with the lung cancer under control and just doing fine. She wasn't on chemo. She wasn't getting any kind of treatment. I think it was being managed. She wasn't on oxygen or anything like that. She was just living her life, but losing a lot of weight. That was the only thing that we noticed, was that she just kept dropping weight. But other than that, she was okay. And then in December of 2008, we had Christmas Eve with her, and she was fairly normal. I look back on that Christmas Eve, and it was kind of fine. It was perfectly fine. And then in January of 2009, my grandfather called me and told me that my grandma was sick, and that she, hey bud, what you doing?
After you're done with your video, could you get me McDonald's?
I don't think you can have McDonald's today. You got to run that through your mother. Close the door, babe. Love you. In January of 2009, my grandfather called me and said that my grandmother, something was wrong with her. They had gone to the grocery store together, and my grandma kind of just freaked out in the grocery store and had to go home. She was dizzy, she was nauseous. I think she threw up in the car. And then while she was home, apparently she fell off the couch. She rolled off the couch. This is at 69 years old. She fell off the couch, so my grandfather was just thinking like, she's sick. Well, she went to the hospital, and I remember getting to the hospital, and my grandmother was in the emergency room, and it was just me and my grandfather, and we were watching, and they were telling her to raise her right hand, and she would, and then they would tell her to raise her left hand, and she wouldn't. And so, but she didn't know that she wasn't. So, they're like, okay, raise both hands, and she just raises one. And everybody's like, okay, good job. And I don't know, it seemed like very quick. Another doctor came in and told my grandfather that it had spread to her brain. And my grandfather's reaction is forever etched in my brain. He just simply, and I'm gonna curse now, folks, so put the earmuffs over the kids. Hang on one sec. Come on in. Finn, what, babe?
I said it's fine.
Okay, I'm doing this. Can you not come in again? So earmuffs on the kids. The doctor told my grandmother that it went to her brain, and my grandfather went, "Oh shit." That was his reaction. I sat down in a chair immediately, head in my hands, and my grandfather was coaching me along to be strong. I then spoke to my grandmother a bit and did the whole, I was pretty much treating it as if she were dying within seconds, and I was, doing the whole purging of feelings and whatnot. It was a decline from there. It was a fast decline. She was getting some heavy radiation. It was affecting her cognitive ability. It was affecting her speech. She was crazy sometimes when we would go over there to visit. She would say odd things, and it was just awful. It was awful. And they got a hospital bed at the house, and she would lay there, and her hair was falling out, and it was terrible. And then in March, so that was just a slow. It was an ugly 2 months. And then in March, maybe March 1st or so, she went to the hospital for something related, and didn't come out. And I remember seeing her on March 5th to visit her for the last time. And again, I did the thing that we do, where you say a whole bunch of things, and you're the best grandmother ever. And I remember apologizing for being bad when I was living with them. And by bad, I mean, just a 15-year-old, 16-year-old kid giving their parent a hard time. And I apologized for being a bad boy. And I said those words. I apologize for being a bad boy. And she patted my hand. That's pretty much all she could do. And then the most famous thing in the world happened. She was mumbling something, and I got closer to her, and I said, what's going on? And she said, her last words to me, I have to poop. She said, I have to poop. And I said, oh, okay. And I called in the nurses, and I was gone. That was it. I left. I said goodbye as they tended to her, and I left. And then I went to work the next day, and I got a call at about 10 a.m. that she had died. And I came home from work, and I went to my grandfather's, and we sat, and then the whole day happened. You know how that happens. So I didn't, grief. I had a hard time with that for a little while. that football season was tough. My grandmother and I would always watch football with my grandfather and play, $1 parlay, pick 'em kind of thing. And I really missed calling her up and asking her how many winners she had, because that's what we would do throughout the Sunday. She'd call me at the end of the 1 o'clock games and say, "How many winners did you have?" And we would do that. So I missed that for that year. I remember having a tough couple nights at home. The stereotypical wake up at 4 a.m. kind of thing, where you're just, your body just wakes up and you're grief stricken at 4 a.m. I had a weird night one night, maybe first night, second night she died. I hadn't quite moved out of the bedroom at that point, but I was sleeping on the couch, and the children's mother was on the couch with me, and I thought that I'd heard her say goodbye. I thought that I had heard her in my sleep, subconsciousness, or as you fall into sleep, drift off into sleep. I thought I heard her say something, and then I woke up, and I didn't know if what I'd heard was real or not. Maybe it was. I don't know. But I struggled, and the problem with the struggle was my grandfather needed me because my grandmother took care of everything. My grandfather, now I failed to mention, my grandfather also had bone cancer at the very same time my grandmother had cancer. So my grandfather was getting treated for bone cancer, and then my grandmother's lung cancer went to her brain. So my grandfather put his cancer aside to look after my grandmother. When she died, then my grandpa could address his own cancer, or the cancer could address its reality and just started making him sick. So now I am at their house taking care of my grandfather daily, making sure he's got food to eat, making sure some of the bills are paid, going through all of my grandmother's stuff, the business of death, getting the death certificates, sending them to the credit card companies or whoever needed them to close her accounts or whatever. And the clean out process, my grandfather, I think 2 days later, my grandfather dealt with my grandma's death by getting rid of all of her clothes, like 2 days later. And I grabbed like a sweatshirt of hers or something and brought it home with me. But I had to then immediately transition into taking care of him. And we had a lot of moments early on together where we would kind of, grieve and cry a little. And, it was tough. It was tough because I spent a lot of time over there taking care of him, and it was still my grandma's house. She was just not there. So then in 2011, my grandfather's cancer got very much worse, and he needed a lot of care. I would spend a couple nights over there, which I hated, because I just didn't know what was going to happen to him in the middle of the night. It was just me and his sister taking care of him, her more than I, her being retired. He had to get injections into his belly, that me and his sister had to figure out how to do. He was angry. He was mean. He wasn't easy to take care of. And there were a lot of points that I was kind of wishing for death for him. It was inevitable. He was in pain. Bone cancer is painful. And, he was just hopped up on OxyContin all the time. And he had a stroke in the middle of the night and went to the hospital and didn't come home. And in 2011, he died. He died in hospice. And I was there. I was there sitting with him as he slept, talking to him a little bit. The nurse came in and said, "Look, he's dying, but I don't think he wants to die when you're here." And my children's mother and I left, and about 4 hours later they called us and said he was gone, and I went back and saw him, and that was tough. that was tough. So after he died, it was again the business of grief, because now I had to take care of their house. I had to get their house, get their estate settled. I had to have a sale, an estate sale, which was honestly one of the worst parts of this, because I grew up in that house, and I didn't want to price anything. I didn't want to have a company come in, and people just came in and went through stuff. And it was a hard time for me to sell stuff, because they would say, hey, how much is this, this knickknack? And, they'd say, I give you $5 for it. And I thought, well, it's not $5. That's $10,000. That knickknack that hung on that shelf ever since I was 8 years old, that is not $5, folks. That is $10,000. That's what it's worth. So I had a lot of trouble letting stuff go, because it was all worth millions. It was priceless. But I let a lot of stuff go. And then I left everything else that didn't sell, everything else I didn't want, I left. And I locked the door, and the house was no longer mine. It was gone. It was turned over to the bank, and it sat vacant for 10 years. And that was difficult. It sat vacant for a long time, 10 years. My sister, I won't tell that long of a story with her. My sister dabbled with substances throughout her life. Dabbled. Very much dabbled. She was not a drug addict. She was a functioning mom. She had 3 children that she, loved. And one night, the story is that she had a argument with her boyfriend. He left. She called a friend, or called not a friend, somebody, a dealer or something, and got some pills. And got in bed with a glass of wine, took the pills, played on her phone, and died. We found out it was hydromorphone. So Opanas, which are really not even on the street anymore. They're an extremely heavy, scary drug. And she took those. I think, unknowingly, she didn't go, well, this is hydromorphone, I would like some Percocets, please. I just think she took pain pills, didn't know what they were, and had some wine and probably some Xanax or something like that, and accidentally died. And that call came at 2:00 in the morning. And again, that's burned in my brain, that phone call of, my mother screaming on the other end, and then the chaos that ensued. She was the only one that had a funeral. My grandparents were cremated without services. They didn't want any. My sister had a funeral. I spoke at the funeral, and not blamed myself for her death, but in front of a standing room only church. My sister was very popular. In front of a ton of people, I said that I failed as a big brother, and gave multiple reasons why. And the main reason why was my sister made a lot of dumb decisions in her life, a lot of bad choices. And I didn't want to see the bad choices anymore. I'd been dealing with her bad choices since she was about 12. And I was never able to be a big brother. She rejected it. And but I also stopped paying attention. I didn't want to see the bad anymore, so I looked away. And by looking away, I missed the good too. Could I have prevented her death? No. But hindsight, regrets. Her death was hard. That there was so much connected to her death. Watching my parents grieve, watching my dad grieve. My dad and I, 6:00 that morning. My other sister, who was a drug addict, was in the hospital at the time due to an arm infection from heroin addiction. My dad and I, at 6 o'clock in the morning of my sister's death, had to go to the hospital, wake up my sister, and tell her that her best friend had died. And that was awful. So my mother's phone call, waking up my sister and seeing her reaction, the dryer going off, those are all etched in my brain. So, you know, as of today, I'm okay with all three losses. I miss my grandmother a great deal. I miss my sister. I miss my grandfather. More importantly, I miss the fact that my children did not have my grandparents. My grandparents were top-notch grandparents, and my kids never got a chance to meet them. My kids never got a chance to be spoiled by my grandmother and grandfather. And, you know, my sister, you know, she was too young. What I tell people is, look, you don't get over losses like this. You don't get over death of substantial people in your life. You have to figure out a way to coexist without them. So early on, I had a hard time coexisting without my grandmother. You know, I had a hard time not calling, you know, to talk about the football games with her. I wasn't figuring out how to coexist without her. But eventually you do. And by coexisting, I mean you go and you live the life that you were, as close to the life as you were going to live while that person was in your life. So there's people who talk about stages of grief. In my life and in my work, I don't promote stages of grief. I think that that's silly of somebody to, you know, give this concrete, formula map to follow with grief. 5 stages or so, you know. Do we feel those things? Sure, but we also feel 137 other things too. So there's no stages of grief, and there's no time for grief. It doesn't have a time limit. If you're grieving over the loss of something or somebody, and somebody tells you, look, it's been such and such an amount of time, you've got to move on here, man. You know, punch them in the face, directly in the mouth area. It doesn't matter how long it's been. Now, remember, I said the best way to do this is to figure out a way to coexist with the loss. Okay, so yes, if you are stuck in bed and not, you know, not productive and not living, and depression has crushed you and flattened you, then yeah, we got a problem. You're not coexisting. You know, you're being overcome by grief. You are being crushed by grief. You know, your daily activities, your activities of daily living are stopped as a result. That's not coexisting. So, you know, support, talking, you know, therapy, and time is how we work through grief and learn again to coexist without the person in our lives. Do I think about my sister and my grandmother and my grandfather every day? No, I probably don't. I don't know if I do or don't. I'm not overcome with thought, but you know, Christmas time and other holidays, and sometimes when I'm down here, I remember everybody, you know, my grandparents and my sister. My sister would always make fun of this room, and both of my sisters make fun of my illness. And my grandmother and grandfather contributed to a lot of it, you know, not directly. I mean, they didn't buy me anything in here, but, you know, they paved the way for me to be obsessed with this stuff. I still stop by my grandmother's house a couple times a year to see the lady who lives there now. She knows me and knows the history. So we spend 5-10 minutes together at Christmas Eve and Thanksgiving. We exchange little gifts. I don't go to cemeteries. My sister's in a cemetery. My grandparents were cremated. I don't go see my sister at the cemetery. I don't know why I would. And that's not to say that anybody who goes to a cemetery is wrong. There is no wrong, remember? I just don't go because I don't think she's there. I don't want to, I don't want to be grim, right? But I don't want to stand above her casket and stare at her headstone and talk to a stone. If there's an afterlife, if there's a heaven, if there's spirits, if there's souls or whatever, if all that stuff is true that they say, why would I want to hang out at a cemetery? If I'm dead, I don't want to hang out at the cemetery. So I don't need to go to the cemetery to visit my sister. I don't like the thought of it. I don't like it. So I don't go to the cemetery. Other people do. My dad goes. My dad dresses her grave and takes care of the leaves, and people leave things, and I just don't go. I don't want to go. So again, I think the biggest part of my grandparents' loss is like I said, not having my children meet them. My kids' grandparents are all, my dad is a good grandfather to my kids, but my dad has grandkids from his second marriage. He's got, my sister's kids. My dad is busy. My mom, I don't speak to all that much. Their mother, the children's mother's mother and sister, we don't talk to. Her father, we don't talk to. My kids don't have anybody, extended family. They have nobody. And my grandparents would have done an awesome job because they would have been their only focus, like I was. So that's that. That's maybe more than you asked, maybe, but I told the story. Coexist. Figure out a way over time to live your life as productively as you can, despite the loss of your loved one. Coexist without them. I can't follow that up with, what's a tag team that I would have liked to have seen. So we'll save those for next time. That's the Power Hour. Heavier than I thought. We will see you all next time. Good night.